Have you ever felt like you're always waiting for something to happen before you can finally start truly living? Have you noticed how everything around us pushes us to believe that happiness lies in some distant point, on an imaginary line that never arrives? That we need to achieve more, learn more, control more, as if there's a promise that someday everything will finally make sense. But what if that promise is a lie? What if this belief in the future, the one that keeps us going even when everything is falling apart, is actually what's keeping us from living right now? Fyodor Dostoevsky saw this blind faith in tomorrow as a poison disguised as hope. To him, the obsession with the future wasn't a sign of progress. It was a form of escape, a desperate attempt to avoid pain, anguish, and the responsibility of being fully alive in the present moment. While everyone else was chasing an idealized tomorrow, he dove headfirst into the present with brutal courage, exposing the rot that no one wanted to look at but had always been there. Modernity promised us that the future would bring comfort, more rights, more technology, more convenience, more control. But all of that gave rise to a generation that feels increasingly lost. We keep waiting for a tomorrow that never comes, while the now slowly rots away. And what's even crueler, the idea of a perfect future has become a standard that humiliates us. If you don't have everything figured out, if you haven't reached that mythical state of stability, it must mean you've failed. The future became more than a promise. It became a demand. And many people fall ill trying to fit into an ideal that was never meant for real human beings. The man who wrote Crime and Punishment understood this before anyone else. While the world screamed for progress, he asked, progress toward what? At what cost? And who gets left behind along the way? His critique didn't come from bitterness. It came from a radical commitment to the truth, because he saw how this illusion was destroying the human soul, turning existence into a race with no finish line. And maybe, if you feel exhausted, out of place, like you're never really living enough, he was speaking directly to you. Picture a man who refuses to be healed, someone who, even when offered a better life, chooses discomfort, who isolates himself because he sees that the outside world, with all its certainties and formulas for happiness, is deeply sick. This man is the protagonist of Notes from Underground, but he's also the author himself. And maybe, just maybe, he's you or me. In the underground, where the light of modern reason cannot reach, lives raw consciousness. There's no makeup there, no self-help, no motivational quotes. There is only the weight of being who you are, with no excuses, no distractions. The underground man is someone who refuses the comfort of lies and chooses the pain of clarity. He sees too much, feels too deeply, thinks too far, and because of that, he suffers. But this suffering isn't pathological. It's a vital response to a world that has simplified the human being until we've become unrecognizable. Dostoevsky created this character as a protest against the idea of the predictable man, the programmable, calculable man who always acts in his own self-interest like a rational machine. To him, this was an insult to the complexity of the human soul, because at its core, the human being is contradiction, is impulse, is chaos, and above all, is freedom, even the freedom to self-sabotage. In the underground of the soul, this restless mind finds the truth that the surface fears, that pain is not a flaw, but a sign we're still alive, that the desire to escape suffering at all costs is what enslaves us, and that clarity often hurts more than ignorance, but it's the only path to a real life. Anyone who enters that underground rarely comes back the same, because there you discover that the future, as an ideal, is just a distraction, a way to avoid confronting what scares us the most, our own soul. The present, with all its flaws and discomfort, is the only place where anything true can be born. And Dostoevsky, with his almost cruel courage, drags us there, whether we like it or not. In the 19th century, many believed humanity was marching toward a perfect world, a future without pain, without conflict, without injustice, built on science, reason, and revolutionary ideals. People believed that with enough education, good laws, and technological progress, we could mold a new man, fair, balanced, predictable. But Fyodor Dostoevsky looked at this dream and saw a farce. He didn't see paradise ahead, he saw a glass prison, a world too orderly to still be human. In his novel Demons, he shows what happens when this utopia is pushed to the extreme. Young idealists, seduced by political theories and revolutionary promises, abandon everything in the name of a greater good, but in the process, lose their souls. Driven by the desire to change the world, they end up destroying everything that's alive, sensitive, and imperfect. Because every rational utopia requires sacrifices, and the first to be sacrificed is always the individual. The novelist saw what others didn't. Human beings don't fit into equations. We are not logical creatures who always choose what's right simply because it makes sense. Sometimes we do the worst even when we know better. Sometimes we destroy what we love most. Sometimes we choose chaos just to feel free again. That's not a flaw of humanity. That's a scream against domestication. The rational utopia wants to turn us into gears, into parts of a polished, predictable, and functional system. But in doing so, it erases what is most precious in us: free will. The Russian thinker understood that in order to build a paradise of reason, whole parts of the human soul would have to be amputated: desire, regret, mistakes, faith, irrational love, guilt, the freedom to fall. And in the end, what's left isn't a better human being. It's a hollow one. Today, we're still being sold that same utopia, just with different words. We're told to follow a plan, think positively, optimize our habits, and keep an open mind. But the anxiety remains. The fear, the emptiness, the loneliness. Maybe that's because we're still trying to fit into a model of existence that was never made for the soul, only for the surface. He didn't hate reason. He hated the arrogance of thinking it could save us. Because what saves us is rarely logical, and what makes us human is often exactly what utopia tries to erase. In the modern world, everything seems to revolve around avoiding suffering. We numb ourselves, run away, speed things up. We create pills, distractions, promises, and goals, all just to avoid feeling. Because we've been taught that to suffer is to be weak, to have failed, to be broken. But the author of The Idiot said the opposite. Suffering is a sign of awareness. It's the soul waking up to reality. In his works, suffering is never just physical pain or external misery. It's an internal jolt, an invisible fracture, a deep stirring of the spirit in response to a world that no longer responds to our illusions. He believed that pain has the power to tear through the surface of existence, to rip through the mask of vanity, security, and self-protection, and reveal something far more real: the fragility of the human condition, and at the same time, its greatness. Characters like Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment only come to understand who they are through suffering, not as punishment, but because pain forces them to face what they've been running from. And what they find isn't just guilt or despair, but also a kind of rebirth, a raw encounter with what is most human, and therefore most sacred. Dostoevsky didn't romanticize pain. He knew suffering from the inside: prison, exile, poverty, epilepsy, the death of loved ones. But he also knew there was something within it that no superficial joy could offer: the possibility of transformation. Suffering to him was a fire that purifies, that burns away the false and the useless until only what matters remains. And maybe that's why, even today, surrounded by comfort and distractions, so many people feel empty, because they've traded real suffering, the kind that teaches, transforms, and connects, for a kind of apathetic indifference, a numbness that shields us from pain, but also from truth. And truth, as he wrote, never comes without first wounding. To suffer is to be awake. It is to feel deeply. It's proof that the soul still responds, that something is still alive inside us. And as harsh as that might sound, it may be the only thing saving us from becoming just another cog in the very world he feared. Why would someone destroy their own peace? Why betray someone they love, sabotage their own dreams, or stir up pain when relief was within reach? This is one of the most disturbing questions Dostoevsky's literature forces us to confront, and one of the most truthful. Because he understood that, contrary to what modern logic tries to teach us, human beings don't just seek well-being. Above all, they seek to be free. And often, being free means choosing what's worse. In Notes from Underground, the main character, a bitter, isolated and painfully self-aware man, challenges the notion that humans are rational and predictable. He says, with fury and clarity, "Man is stupid, stupid with a magnificent stupidity. He consciously prefers what is harmful." And when we read that with modern eyes, it's deeply unsettling, because we recognize ourselves in it. How many times have you known exactly what to do to feel better, and yet done the opposite? How many times have you feared getting better, healing, changing? Not out of inability, but because deep down, something in you resisted. This underground man isn't meant to be a role model. He's a living indictment, a distorted mirror of the human soul, revealing what we try to hide, our tendency to sabotage our own path as a way to assert our autonomy. He doesn't want to be saved because he understands that to be shaped by the world is to be erased by it. For him, to suffer is to keep his individuality alive. Dostoevsky didn't see this as mere madness. He saw it as part of the deepest structure of the human being, the ability to say no, even to what seems good, just to prove we still have the power to choose. And that choice, even when irrational, even when destructive, is, paradoxically, a radical affirmation of freedom. Today we call this self-sabotage. We try to fix it, manage it, control it. But there's a part of this pain that can't be solved with techniques or positivity. There's a kind of pain that comes from a soul screaming against the world's falseness, a pain that demands to be heard, not silenced. And when we muffle that scream, all that's left is a quiet emptiness, a life that looks fine on the outside, but feels dead within. The underground man still exists, not just in books, but in people who think too much, feel too deeply, and carry inside themselves a silent revolt against everything plastic, shallow, and predictable. These people don't want a perfect life. They want a life that's real, even if it means getting hurt along the way. In The Brothers Karamazov, we find one of the most unsettling dialogues in modern literature. Ivan, one of the book's most rational characters, declares that if God doesn't exist, then everything is permitted. It's not just a theological provocation. It's a piercing diagnosis of the abyss that opens up when life loses its deepest meaning. Because when the sacred is stripped away from existence, what's left might be freedom, or a hollow that devours from within. The Russian thinker lived during a time when traditional faith was beginning to crumble under the weight of new scientific and philosophical ideas. The future seemed bright, more freedom, more autonomy, more progress. But he saw the flip side. What happens to a person when the axis that once held their soul together dissolves? When there is no longer any ultimate meaning to goodness, to pain, to love? When everything becomes a matter of personal choice, and therefore everything becomes unstable? That emptiness, in his view, isn't just any absence. It's an inner silence that grows as old values fade, and the new ones fail to offer anything truly meaningful. It's as if the world had lost its center, and humanity were now spinning around itself, more self-aware than ever, but also more alone. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov tries to justify a terrible act using modern ideas. If great men can rise above common laws, then so can he. But the outcome is devastating, not because he's punished from the outside, but because his inner world collapses. The novel shows that without a deeper reference point, even the most logical actions become unbearable. Guilt doesn't disappear. It transforms into a constant shadow, a lingering discomfort that no external progress can erase. Today, many people live out that same dilemma. We've replaced God with goals, techniques, absolute freedom. And still, the anguish lingers. Because human beings don't survive on achievements alone. We need meaning. We need to feel that our pain has value, that our efforts are not just a series of tasks, but part of something larger, even if that something can't be measured or proven. Dostoevsky didn't impose beliefs. He simply showed what happens when everything becomes relative. When every person becomes the center of their own universe, but without solid ground, without direction, without real connection. And maybe that's why his work still speaks so loudly, because even without giving easy answers, it never turned away from the hardest questions. From a young age, we're taught that freedom is the ultimate ideal. To choose your own path, define your desires, live without chains. Freedom is sold to us as the peak of maturity, the proof that we've outgrown the rigid structures of the past. But what no one really tells us is the weight that freedom carries. And when that weight falls on our shoulders, many find themselves paralyzed, confused, empty, as if something so glorified were deep down a trap. In Russian literature, this tension between freedom and suffering is pushed to the extreme. In one of the most famous passages from the Brothers Karamazov, the character of the Grand Inquisitor confronts Christ and accuses him of having given mankind an impossible burden: choice, the ability to decide for oneself. According to him, man does not want to be free. He wants to be guided, protected, spared from the terror of having to construct meaning on his own. This dilemma still pulses strongly today. The freedom we so often celebrate often comes with subtle demands. Be yourself, but within certain limits. Follow your path, but don't fail. Make your choices, but bear the consequences alone. And so, what was meant to be liberating becomes a silent burden, one that many carry in silence. The thinker who descended into the basement of human consciousness knew that true freedom requires courage, because it doesn't rest on external promises, but on hard decisions, personal responsibility, and staying true to something we often can't even name. For him, freedom wasn't about doing whatever you want. It was about having the strength not to run from yourself. And that may be the cruelest part of the modern promise. By offering everything, it leaves us with the weight of giving meaning to every choice, every step, every mistake. Without a deeper foundation, without an internal axis, freedom becomes unbearable. It's as if we're left wandering in an open field, directionless, with every path available, and none of them truly desired. Dostoevsky had already seen the paradox. Human beings need freedom, but they also need something to give it shape, a center, an inner silence that can hold the weight of decisions, even when the entire world seems incoherent. And without that, freedom stops being a triumph. It becomes abandonment. Amid so many pages filled with pain, violence, guilt, and despair, one sentence appears that disarms even the most skeptical reader. Beauty will save the world. It's impossible not to stop. Coming from someone who plunged so deeply into the human abyss, this statement sounds like an unexpected whisper, or a desperate kind of hope. But this beauty has nothing to do with surface. It's not decorative aesthetics or romantic idealization. It's not about landscapes, faces, or museum art. It's existential beauty, the kind that appears when someone forgives in silence, when someone loves without reason, when someone sacrifices without expecting anything in return. A faint light that shines paradoxically in the mud. It's the beauty that arises when someone, even broken inside, chooses not to become cruel. Throughout his novels, especially in the most shattered, ambiguous, intense characters, we see this beauty emerge, almost hidden, in the eyes of someone who's suffered too much, but still reaches out, in the quiet dignity of someone who's lost everything, but still carries a spark of compassion. It's a beauty that doesn't impose itself, but reveals itself, that doesn't announce itself, but transforms those who can see it. This line, spoken by Prince Mishkin in The Idiot, carries more than optimism. It carries faith in the inexplicable. Because even after exploring cruelty, injustice, greed and loss, there remains this possibility that something beautiful, even fragile, silent, and imperfect, could redeem what once seemed beyond repair. Maybe that's the answer so many people search for and can't find in easy solutions, that it's not the future or success or perfection that saves us. It's the ability to see beauty where no one else does, to preserve the soul in a world that cheapens everything, to protect what is subtle, what is true, what has no practical utility, but without which life loses its glow. And if it's true that beauty can save the world, maybe it won't happen in grand gestures, but in small acts, in private decisions, in invisible transformations, because the world may be cold, but the human soul still has warmth. And as long as that remains, there's still something worth saving. In a world obsessed with goals, promises, and future achievements, the idea that redemption could be found in the now sounds absurd. After all, we've been trained to believe that only after immense effort, discipline, or spiritual evolution will we be worthy of peace. But in Dostoevsky's view, the present moment is the only place where something real can be born. In his novels, the greatest turning points don't come when characters succeed, but when something shifts inside, usually in the midst of pain, regret, or collapse. It's not tomorrow that transforms them, but the courage to face what's in front of them, right here and now. Redemption for him isn't a reward at the end of the road. It's a miracle that occurs when someone becomes able to see themselves with honesty. This vision is revolutionary because it goes against everything we're sold. They tell us to wait, improve, fix everything before we deserve rest. But what if that's not true? What if transformation isn't in the future, but in how we face the present, even broken, even lost, even without knowing which way to go? The beauty of redemption, in that case, doesn't lie in reaching an ideal, but in courageously inhabiting the moment you're living, in not fleeing your own pain, in opening yourself to someone else's fragility, in recognizing your own darkness and still choosing to love. And that can happen right now. No manual, no script, no appointed time. While everyone is betting on what's still to come, the author of so many abysses reminds us that life can only be touched in the present. And maybe the miracle we're all searching for isn't something that will come, but something that's already happening and just needs to be seen. Looking at the world today, it's hard to ignore the echo of the warnings Dostoevsky left in his work. The promise of a better future has turned into a suffocating demand. Freedom has become a burden. The absence of meaning, a collective symptom. The masks remain, but the soul, when it still allows itself to feel, senses that something essential is missing. Many try to stay optimistic, as if doubting the promise of progress were a moral failure. But there's a deep kind of courage in admitting, maybe we're heading in the wrong direction. Maybe all this acceleration, performance, and constant chasing after more is pulling us away from what truly matters. Maybe the problem isn't us, but what we were taught to hope for. Dostoevsky didn't point this out of pessimism, but out of a deep love for truth, because only someone who loves life profoundly can face its darkest sides without looking away. He didn't see the future as automatic redemption. He believed in clarity, in internal transformation, in the silent impact of a choice made with awareness. And if today you feel tired of the race, of the pressure to be happy, to have everything figured out, to chase after what hasn't come yet, maybe that old clarity was right. Maybe the peace you're searching for isn't in what's missing, but in what's right in front of you now, waiting to be seen.